welcome to this year's Virtual Drama Club Readers Theater production of Bunnicula by Deborah and James Howe. What's Readers Theater, you might ask? Well, it is an enjoyable way to read aloud and share literature. Readers Theater does not require memorizing a script and does not require props, costumes, or sets. Unlike traditional theater, the emphasis is mainly on oral expression, and almost any story can be scripted for Readers Theater. In our case, some of my former drama club students took the humorous tale of Bunnicula and adapted it into a Readers Theater production. The story of Bunnicula focuses on the Monroe family and features a vampire rabbit named Bunnicula, who sucks the juice out of vegetables. To make the book even funnier, the story is told from the point of view of the family's dog Harold and their very kind of unusual cat, Chester. We hope you enjoy our virtual show.
Welcome to the 5th and 6th grade production of Bunnicula. I am Ariana Ward, and I will be playing Mrs. Monroe.
I am Zoe Weitzel, and I will be playing the part of Chester the cat.
I am Joey McPike. I'm going to be playing Pete and Harold the dog.
I am Aiden, and I'm going to be playing Toby and Mr. Manuel.
I am Claire Farnham, and I'm going to play narrator 1 and 2.
I shall never forget the first time I laid eyes on our visitor. I was left home by the family with the mission to take care of the house until they returned. That's what they always say. Take care of the house, Harold. You're the watchdog. I guess it's the way of making up for not being able to take me with them. As if I want to go anyway. You can't lie down at the movies and scratch yourself in public. No, thank you. I'd rather be stretched out on my favorite rug in front of a nice whistling radiator. But I digress. I was talking about the first night. Well, it was cold. Rain was pelting the windows. The wind was howling. It felt pretty good to be indoors. I was just lying on the rug with my head in my paws, just standing absently at the front door.
Harold hears the car and does not bother to get up.
Put him over here, Dad.
Take your boots off. You're soaking wet.
But Mom, I want about the...
First, stop dripping on the carpet.
Would somebody like to take this? I'd like to remove my jet coat.
I will.
No, I will. I found it.
You'll drop him.
Will not.
You will too.
Ow, Mom, Pete punched me.
I'll take him. Take your coats off this instant.
Harold, guess what happened to me?
At this point, I feel like I must explain something. In our family, everyone treats everyone else with great respect for his or her intelligence. That goes for animals as well as people. Everything that happens to them is explained to us. Someone just give old Harold a usual litter box, Chester. At our house, it's, hey Harold, Dad got a raise, and now we're in a higher tax bracket. Or Chester, come sit in the bed and watch this Wild Kingdom show. Maybe you'll see a relative, which just shows how thoughtful they are. But after all, Mr. Monroe is a college professor and Mrs. Monroe is a lawyer. So we think it's a rather special household, and we are, therefore, rather special pets. So it wasn't surprising to me that they took the time to explain the strange circumstances surrounding the arrival of the little bundle with the glistening eyes now among us.
It seems that they had arrived at the theater late and decided to sit in the last row, which was empty. They tiptoed in and sat down so they wouldn't disturb them. Suddenly, Toby sprang up from his chair, screeching that he had sat on something. Mrs. Monroe told him to stop making a fuss and sit in another seat. But Toby wanted to see what he had sat on.
Apparently, an usher came over to shush them, and Mr. Monroe borrowed his flashlight.
What they found on Toby's chair was the little bundle that was now sitting on Mr. Monroe's lap. They unwrapped the blanket, and there was a tiny black and white rabbit sitting in a shoebox filled with dirt. A piece of paper with words written on it had been tied to his neck with a ribbon. Harold leaned in close to get a better look at the paper and recognized the language as an obscure dialect of the Carpathian mountain region. Roughly translated, it read, "Take good care of my baby." The little rabbit was shivering from fear and cold. It was decided that Mr. Monroe and the boys would make a house for him out of an old crate and some heavy-duty wire mesh from the garage. But for tonight, the boys would make a bed for him in the shoebox. Toby and Pete ran outside to find the crate, and Mrs. Monroe went into the kitchen to get him some milk and lettuce. Mr. Monroe sat down, looking dazed with the bunny on his lap. Harold and Chester moseyed close casually over to the corner of the room.
Well, what do you think?
I don't think rabbits like milk. Chester and Harold were unable to continue their conversation because of a deafening crash.
Ma, Toby broke the rabbit's house.
I didn't. I just dropped it. Pete won't let me carry it.
It's too big. Toby's too little.
I'm not.
You are too.
Okay, fellas, let's try to get it in here with as little hysteria as possible, please.
That lettuce looks repulsive, but if there's any milk left, I get it.
You'll get no argument from me. I'm a warm man myself. Ma, Toby said he's going to keep the rabbit in his room. That's not fair. Harold sleeps in his room. Only sometimes, I thought, when I know he's got leftover ham sandwich in his drawer. Toby's a nice kid, don't get me wrong, but it doesn't hurt that he shares his good stash of goodies with me. It was, after all, at one of those late night parties in Toby's room that I first developed my taste for chocolate cake. And Toby has kept me eating chocolate cake ever since.
But he's mine. I found him.
You sat him. You mean?
I found him, and he's sleeping in my room.
You can keep smelly old Harold in your room, and Chester too, but I'm gonna keep the rabbit in mine. Smelly old Harold? I will have bent his ankle, but I knew he hadn't changed his socks for a week. Smelling my foot.
I think the best place for the rabbit's right here in the living room. On the table by the window, it's light. He'll get lots of fresh air. Pete tells him. He'll be able to see the rabbit better.
Too bad, Squirt.
Okay, let's put him to bed. And then we can all get some sleep.
Why? I don't want to go to bed.
Mrs. Monroe smiled a little too sweetly at Pete.
He's not drinking his milk.
Didn't I tell you? Excuse me while I make myself available.
Hey, we gotta name him. Can't that wait until tomorrow?
No, he has to have a name right now. I have to say, I agreed with them. It took them 3 days to name me, and those were the 3 most anxious days of my life. I couldn't sleep worrying that they were going to call me Fluffy, as Mrs. Monroe had suggested.
Oh. Well, all right. What about, say, Fun Fun?
Uh-oh, there she goes again. Where did she get them?
Yuck! Well then, how about Fluffy?
You never give up, do you, Ma?
Chester, meanwhile, who had also been named Fluffy for a short time, was rubbing against Mrs. Monroe's ankles and purring loudly.
No, Chester, not now.
He wants to help us name him, don't you, Chester? Come on, Harold. You've got to help with the name, too.
With that, everyone pushed into the box.
So, this is a rabbit, I thought? He sort of looks like Chester, only he's got long ears and a short hair, and a motor in his nose. Well, since we found him at the movies, why don't we call him Mr. Johnson?
Huh? Huh?
The guy who owns the movies?
No one liked that idea.
How about Prince? Dad, are you kidding me? Well, I had a dog named Prince once. We found him in a Dracula movie. Let's call him Dracula.
That's a dumb name.
It's not. Anyways, I found him. So I should get to name him.
Mom, you're not gonna name him, are you? That's favoritism, and I'll be traumatized if you do.
Mrs. Monroe glares at Pete.
Please, Mom. Please, Dad. Let's name him Dracula, please.
Mrs. Monroe picks up the bowl of milk and moves towards the kitchen. Chester follows her every movement with his eyes, which now seem to be popping out of his head. No more arguments. Let's compromise. He's a bunny, and we found him at a Dracula movie. So we'll call him Bunnicula. Bunnicula. That's it. That should make everybody happy, including me.
What about me? I won't be happy until she puts down that milk.
Wow.
Yeah, Mom. That name is just right.
It's okay, but I get to feed him.
I'm going to put the milk back in the fridge. Maybe he'll drink it tomorrow.
What about Chester? Maybe he'd like the milk.
Chester made a beeline for Mrs. Monroe and looked up at her plaintively. Oh, Chester doesn't want any more milk, do you, Chester? You've already had your milk today.
Bedtime. Good night, Bunnicula.
Oh no, it's called Bunnicula. I may be wrong here, but I thought I saw a flicker from the cage.
Good night, Harold. Good night, Chester.
Good night, Smeller Harold. I drooled on Pete's foot. Mom, Harold drooled on my foot.
Good night, Pete. Good night, Harold. Good night, Chester. Mr. and Mrs. Monroe went up the stairs together.
You know, that was a very clever name. I could never have thought of that name like that.
Oh, I don't know. I think Prince is a lovely name, too. The room was quiet. Chester was still standing by the closed kitchen door in a state of shock. Slowly, he turned to Harold.
I wish they had named him Fluffy.
The next few days passed uneventfully. Harold was very bored. Bunnicula slept all day, and Chester, whose curiosity had been aroused by the strange behavior of that rabbit that first night, had decided to stay awake every night to observe him. Therefore, he too spent most of his day sleeping, so Harold had no one to talk to. The evenings weren't much better. Toby and Pete, who used to play with Harold as soon as they got home from school, now ran immediately to that silly rabbit's cage to play with him, or at least they tried to. Bunnicula did not make the most energetic playmate. He didn't play fetch. He didn't roll over to get his tummy rubbed. Harold couldn't understand why they played with him at all. He accepted it because it was Bunnicula that was new and different, but he was confident that they would soon come back to trusty old Harold. Finally, on the morning of the fourth day, Harold caught Chester bleary-eyed over the water dish.
You know, Chester, you're never exactly charming in the morning, but lately you've been downright grumpy. What are you doing this for anyway? What are you looking for? You're just a cute little bunny.
Cute little bunny! That's what you think. He's a danger to this house and everyone in it.
Oh, Chester, I think your reading has gone to your head.
It's just because I do read that I know what I'm talking about.
Well, what are you talking about?
I'm not sure yet, but I know there's something funny about that rabbit. That's why I have to keep alert.
Well, look at you. You're exhausted. You sleep all the time. How do you call that alert?
I'm awake when it's important. He sleeps all day, so I sleep all day.
So just what have you seen since that first night? It makes you so uneasy.
Well, that is.
At this point, Chester started to bang his tail, which is a cat's way of changing a subject that makes them uncomfortable.
So, what have you seen?
Nothing. But that doesn't mean there is nothing to see.
For the next few mornings, it was the same routine. Harold would be ready for a good romp around the living room, and Chester would go to sleep. Everyone else was gone or sick. No one to play with poor neglected Harold. At first, he thought he could maybe strike up a friendship with Bunnicula, but Harold could never wake him up. A rabbit, Harold concluded, is cute to look at, but is generally useless. One morning, Chester had news to report.
That bunny got out of his cage last night.
Don't be ridiculous. How can you break through that wire? Look how tiny he is.
That's just it. He didn't break through any wire. He got out of his cage without breaking anything or opening any doors. Now, Harold, I don't want you thinking I'm not a good watch cat, but after a few hours last night, I grew curious about the time. And I went into the hallway. You know that new clock they've got? Well, see, it has this thing hung on the doorknob. You know that thing they hung on the doorknob for me to play with when I was a kitten? Every time I hit that silly squirrel with my paw, it would swing back and hit me on the nose. I hated that toy. So naturally, I decided to have nothing to do with it at all.
Oh, curiosity?
I suppose you could call it that. I put one paw over my nose and reached out with the other and gave it a good snap. Ah, darn, you broke my arm. It's still tender. See how swollen it is?
Oh,
Chester showed Harold his little paw, but Harold couldn't see anything wrong, but he knew better to argue with him.
oh yes. That looks terrible. You must be suffering awfully.
I couldn't even get to the pendulum. Somebody had put glass in front of it, and I was pretty mad. I was all set to go back, but at the same time, I couldn't help it go back and forth and back and forth. Before I knew it, I had waken up.
You fell asleep?
I couldn't help it. I didn't even know it had happened. I looked at the clock and realized that I had been gone for 45 minutes. I ran back into the living room, looked at Bunnicula's cage, and it was empty. It was then that I noticed a light coming from under the kitchen, and then I heard the refrigerator door close, and the lights went out.
It must have been Mr. Monroe having his midnight snack.
No, that's what I thought. I jumped on my chair, curled up, and pretended to sleep, keeping one eye open. Slowly, the door opened, and this little head poked out around the corner and looked either side. Guess who came bouncing out all by himself with an idiotic grin plastered on his face?
I'm guessing it wasn't Mr. Monroe?
Not unless he wears bunny pajamas and gets very tiny at night.
Bunnicula, huh?
You got it. Unfortunately, I wasn't positioned correctly so that I couldn't see him get back into the cage. I still don't know how he got in or got out.
At this point, Mr. Monroe came downstairs to make breakfast. Chester and Harold took their positions under the kitchen table to wait.
Holy cow! Pete, come down here now!
What is that?
Beats me, it looks like a white tomato.
What tomato? Funny guy.
Pete enters the kitchen.
Pete, have you been playing with your chemistry set again?
No, Dad. What?
I thought maybe this was one of your experiments.
Oh, gee, Dad, looks like a white tomato.
Toby and Mrs. Monroe enter. What's all the fuss about?
We're just trying to figure out what that is.
Well, it looks to me like a white tomato.
You know, it really does look like a white tomato.
Well, let me cut it open and we can find out. Mrs. Monroe cut through the thing with a knife as the family and Chester and Harold looked on. It's a tomato, all right. Here are the seeds.
It's all dry.
And look, it's white.
There's no juice in it at all. Well, Anne, what do you think?
It's gone bad, I guess. Though I've never heard of a tomato turning white before. Come on, let's throw it out and have breakfast. Harold, get your paws off the table.
Rats.
Chester jumped down from Toby's shoulders and motioned for Harold to follow him into the living room.
This had better be important to cooking bacon.
A white tomato. Very significant.
So it's a white tomato. I'm going back to the kitchen. I don't want to miss out on bacon. What does that white tomato have to do with Bunnicula?
I can tell you one thing. I got a good look at that tomato. There were very suspicious teeth marks on the skin.
So,
Teeth marks.
So
Tonight I'm going to reread a book I read last year.
how fascinating. And just what that white book might be?
The Mark of the Vampire.
What?
Meet me tonight after the others have gone to sleep. You'd better take a nap today so you can stay awake.
Chester closed his eyes, and Harold shifted his gaze to Bunnicula, who seemed to be asleep in his cage with a tiny smile on his lips. Harold's reverie was broken by the sound of crunching bacon. Harold was in the kitchen in a flash.
Hello, my name is Cole Pokriva, and we are going to be playing chapter 4, 5, and 6, and I play Harold, Toby, Narrator 1, and Mr. Monroe.
Hi, I'm Liliana Pokriva, and we are doing chapter 4, 5, and 6. I am Chester, Narrator 2, Mrs. Monroe, and Pete.
Harold almost didn't make it to his meeting with Chester that night.
Every Friday night, Toby stays up late reading, and of course, he needs lots of food to keep up his strength.
This evening, Harold somehow wormed his way on top of Toby's stomach. He's usually a little more stubborn about it, but Friday nights mean chocolate cupcakes with cream in the center. Hi, Harold. I bet you would like this old peanut butter sandwich. Wouldn't you? It's old and left over from yesterday. Here, you eat this while I have this boring old chocolate cupcake that's fresh and has cream in the center. Ha ha, my sides are splitting. No? Huh? Well, I would give you my chocolate cupcake, but I know how much you hate chocolate cupcakes. Oh, you like them? Okay, then you can have one. From past experience, Harold knows that although Toby has a rotten sense of humor, he is a very nice kid.
Sometime later, after Harold ate his chocolate cupcake with the cream in the center, Toby told Harold he had to go to bed.
Good night, Harold. If you're going to sleep here, you have to get off my stomach because it's a little full right now. Harold decides to go downstairs.
Well, you certainly took your time. I finished my book half an hour ago. Where were you?
It so happens I was discussing the great works of literature with Toby.
Since when is a Twinkies wrapper considered a great work of literature? Come over here and let me show you this book. Harold looked at the chair. Chester was already sitting in it with a very large book open in front of him.
I don't think there's going to be enough room for both of us, Chester.
Come on, you're wasting time. Just jump up here. Will you get up here already?
Harold ran and jumped onto the chair, landing with a great club plop. Chester, where are you?
I'm here, you great oaf. You knocked me off the chair. Now stay put. I'm coming back up. Now, let's get down to the brass tacks.
What is exactly on your mind?
This book and that rabbit. Now tell me, Harold, have you noticed anything funny about that rabbit?
No, but I've certainly noticed a lot of funny things about you recently.
Think about it. The rabbit sleeps all day.
So do you. So do I.
Furthermore, he goes in and out of his cage by himself. What kind of rabbit can do that?
A smart one. I could do it.
We're not talking about you, Harold. We're talking about the rabbit. Now, where did they find him?
At the movies.
Yes, but what movie?
Dracula. So,
Remember the note around his neck? What language was it in?
an obscure delicate of the Carpathian mountain region.
Aha! But what area of the Carpathian mountain region?
Huh?
Transylvania. That proves my point.
What point? What are we talking about?
And don't forget the white tomato. That's the most important of all.
But what?
This book tells us just what we need to know.
What? What does it tell us? What does this book have to do with Bunnicula? What are you talking about? What's going on here? I can't stand it anymore.
You're very excitable, Harold. That's not good for your blood pressure.
Harold put his paws around Chester's throat. Tell me, or I squeeze you till you pop.
Okay, don't get upset. Now, this book tells you everything you've always wanted to know about vampires, but were afraid to ask.
Personally, I never wanted to know anything about vampires, but at this moment I was afraid to tell Chester. I still don't understand what vampires have to do with our little furry friend.
1. Vampires do not sleep at night. They only sleep during the day. The same holds true for this rabbit. 2. Vampires can get in and out of locked rooms. Bunnicula gets in and out of his locked cage.
Didn't you say something about the refrigerator?
That's right. He got the refrigerator open by himself. And 3. Vampires have long pointed teeth. They're called fangs.
Well, don't we have fangs?
No, we have canines. That's different.
What's different about it?
Fangs are more pointed and vampires use fangs to bind people on the neck.
Yuck, who would want to do that?
Vampires would, that's who.
Wait a minute, I saw Miss Marone bite Mr. Monroe on the neck once. Does that mean she's a vampire?
Boy, are you dumb. She's not a vampire, she's a lawyer.
She bites necks.
I don't think that's quite the same thing. Now, Bunnicula does not bite people on the neck, at least not so far, but he does bite vegetables.
On the neck?
Vegetables don't have necks, Harold. Vegetables are like that. It's like dogs. Dogs don't have brains. Dogs are like that.
Oh yeah, all rabbits bite vegetables.
He bites them, Harold, but does not eat them. That tomato was all white. What does that mean?
It means that he paints vegetables?
It means that he bites the vegetables to make a hole in them, and then he sucks out all the juices.
But what about all the lettuce and carrots Toby has been feeding him in his cage?
Aha, look at this. Chester stuck his paw under the chair cushion and brought out with a flourish an assortment of strange white objects. Some of them looked like unironed handkerchiefs.
What are they?
Lettuce and carrots. White lettuce and carrots. I found them hidden behind his cage. Look, the cage is empty again. Oh, we're fools. We're fools. We let him out of our sight. It's your fault.
My fault? Why is it my fault?
Wait, why are we arguing? Let's find Bunnicula.
They heard a click. Refrigerator. They moved towards the kitchen.
Shh. Don't make any noise. We don't want him to hear us. Coming.
Blissly.
He must have closed the refrigerator. Easy now.
Psst, Chester.
What?
I can't see.
I can, but I can't see him.
He's not here.
There was a soft scamper across the linoleum, and they turned just in time to see a little white tail bounce out the door and into the living room. Drat, we missed him. Come on, Harold.
Wait, Chester, what's on the floor by the refrigerator? This new object interests him more than following Bunnicula. Chester slunk across the room slowly, muscles taut, eyes alert. When he was about 6 inches away, he struck out his paw, closed his eyes, and barreled at the object but didn't make any contact. Get closer!
Who's the cat here? I know what I'm doing. Chester proceeded to bat the air 3 more times without touching it.
What is it?
I don't know yet, but whatever it is, it's not alive.
Oh boy, if I wait for you, we'll be here all night.
Well,
Beats me. Chester moved closer to the object. After a moment of close examination, he gasped and Harold jumped.
Harold,
What?
it's
Yes?
It's
What is it, Chester?
it's a white zucchini.
This is chapter 5.
Robert, come down here right away. There's something wrong in the kitchen.
For a moment, panic seized Harold. He thought she had run out of dog food. But then he remembered the events of the previous evening as Mr. Monroe came out bounding down the stairs. Chester, did you see Mr. Monroe? His face has turned white. It's Bunnicula, isn't it?
No, it's shaving cream, you idiot. By now, the excitement in the kitchen was at full throttle. The table was covered with Bunnicula's handiwork. There were white beans and white peas and white squash and white tomatoes and white lettuce and white zucchini. What can it mean, Robert? I'm getting worried. One tomato is a curiosity, but this is unheard of.
There must be something wrong with our refrigerator. That's it. It's turning all the vegetables white.
But look, I left these tomatoes on the windowsill, and they're white too. And the squash I left on the bowl on the table. Holy cow, what's going on?
Hey, maybe it's the vegetable blight, Ma.
Could that be, Robert? Have you ever heard of anything like that?
Well, no. Actually, I've heard of blight, but nothing like this.
This will take forever if we leave it up to them. Sometimes human beings can be so slow. It's DDT, Mom. I know about this stuff. It's because you buy vegetables that aren't organic. All vegetables are organic, Peter. That's not what my teacher says. See, Toby, I told you this would happen. Using chemicals on our food, and if you're not careful, you'll turn white too.
Like Dad?
Robert, couldn't you take that shaving cream off your face?
Oh, yes, of course. Where's my towel? I know I brought it down with me.
For that matter, where was Chester?
Pete, did you take my towel?
Why did I take your towel, Dad? I don't shave.
Just then, the door swung open. I couldn't believe my eyes. There was Chester with Mr. Monroe's towel draped across his back and tied under his neck like a cape. That was strange enough, but on his face was an expression that sent chills down my spine. His teeth were bared and gleaming in the morning light. He cackled, then miscellaneously, and threw back his head as if he were laughing at all of us. I thought he had lost his mind. There's my towel. What's the matter, Chester? Were you cold?
Mr. Monroe bent down to take the towel from Chester. Before he could lay his hands on it, Chester flipped over onto his back, closed his eyes, and folded his paws over his chest. Then he slowly lifted his head, his eyes blazed and vacant. Soon the upper half of his body followed until he was in a sitting position.
Hey, Dad, did you leave your brandy glasses out last night? Chester's acting a little weird. Well, son, cats are funny creatures. I glanced at Chester. He wasn't laughing. Psst, Chester, what are you up to?
I'm a vampire, you dope. Can't you tell? I'm trying to warn them.
Well, it's not working. You better think of something else. So you see, Toby, all cats are as individual as all people. Maybe he just wants to get our attention. Isn't that right, kitty cat? Now, Chester, give me back my towel. Chester's eyes lit up. He looked at Harold and smiled, walking slowly toward him, and then lunged. Yow!
Mom, Chester bit Harold on the neck. Oh, that wasn't a real bite, was it, Chester? That was a love bite. Isn't that cute?
Love bit my foot. That hurt. Chester, what is the matter with you? Do I look like a tomato?
Oh, it doesn't matter anyways, Harold. They don't understand. How can human beings read the same books I do and still be so sick?
Mrs. Monroe picked up Chester and cuddles him.
Poor Chester, you need a little love. Do you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna kiss you on your little nose. Chester went limp in Mrs. Monroe's arms while Mr. Monroe took his towel off Chester.
I still don't know why he's wearing my towel.
I think he must be cold, dear. Here's your towel. Why don't you get his kitty sweater? He can wear that if he's cold.
Chester and I did not speak until late afternoon. I was busy nursing my neck, and Chester was busy hiding under the sofa, too embarrassed to be seen. Hey, Chester, we don't have to worry about any vampire bunnies anymore. All you have to do is stand outside his cage wearing that sweater, and he'll laugh himself to death. Chester was not amused.
That's right. Make fun. All of you. No one understands. I tried to warn them. Now I'm going to take matters into my own hands. Whereupon, Chester, wearing his yellow kitty sweater with the 16 purple mice on it, went into the kitchen for dinner.
This is chapter 6. That night, Harold had an uneasy sleep. Noises kept coming from downstairs like toenails clicking on the floor. Harold assumed that it was Bunnicula on his midnight run.
He smelled the funniest odor in the air, something familiar, though he could not place it. As the night progressed, it grew stronger and stronger until it finally tickled Harold's nose and he sneezed himself awake.
Harold jumped off Toby's bed and went to see if Chester could smell it too. Ew, Chester, what is that? And what are you wearing? It smells.
Of course it smells. I made one for you.
That thing smells like garlic. It reeks.
It is garlic.
Why are you wearing it though? Trips over a different piece of garlic.
Careful, you'll knock them around.
Harold looks around. There was garlic everywhere. Bunnicula has his nose buried in a blanket. Apparently, Bunnicula does not like the garlic.
Harold was about to return to Toby's bed to bury his nose in the blankets when Chester grabbed his tail with his teeth. You're not leaving this room until you put this on.
Harold starts walking away. It's not polite to talk with your mouth full. Chester, drop my tail.
Listen, this book said to use garlic.
What book? The Joy of Cooking?
The Mark of the Vampire says garlic renders vampires immobile.
What does that mean?
It means they can't go anywhere if there's garlic around.
Well, I've got news for you, Chester. I can't go anywhere either. The smell is killing me.
But you've got to put it on. It says so in the book. If you don't put it on, I'll put it on for you.
So, Chester, I'll be leaving this room right down. Harold was so thick to his stomach from the smell of garlic that he decided to spend the early morning hours outdoors. Suddenly, the peaceful calm was broken by the screams coming from the kitchen. Oh my, Harold thought. What's turning white now?
It was Chester, who was yelling his head off in the sink, covered with soap. Mrs. Monroe was scrubbing Chester and seemed to be in the middle of a long lecture. I don't know what got into you, Chester. You never played with garlic before. I thought you hated the smell of it, and here you got it all over yourself. Stop riddling. You'll get soap in your eyes. And if you want to chew on something, I'll give you some catnip. But stay out of my herbs.
Miss Monroe rinsed off Chester, rubbing him with a towel, and plunged him in the front of the stove to finish drying.
Shut the door! I'm freezing. That silly woman doesn't get that cats don't take baths.
What do you mean? I get baths all the time.
That's because you're too dumb to bathe yourself. Cats always bathe themselves. It's a rule. Everyone knows that.
Well, at least it smells nice in here again.
It sure smells nice again, but the house isn't safe anymore.
What do you mean?
I mean, it worked last night. The garlic worked. No more vegetables turned white, did they?
No, but
That means Bunnicula didn't get out of his cage last night.
maybe he was just tired and maybe it was full.
No dice. Just read this to me so I'll be sure if Don't be ridiculous. It was garlic. He couldn't leave his cage, but tonight he'll be free to roam again, and I've got to find a way to stop him that isn't smelly.
Mr. and Mrs. Monroe were hurrying in and out of the room late for work.
Toby, don't forget to take the steak out of the freezer when you get home and leave it on the table to defrost. And this time, remember to put a plate under it. Of course, that's what I'll do. Chester walked over to Harold and bit him on the ear. Boy, nothing wakes you up. I've been yelling and poking you for 10 minutes.
I was dreaming about a place where there weren't any cats around to bother nice dogs and wake them up when they needed their rest.
You can sleep later. Right now, you have to help me.
Do what?
Get Bunnicula out of his cage.
Get him out of the cage? I thought that is what you didn't want. I thought you said he was dangerous. What if he attacks me?
Aren't you ashamed? Afraid of a harmless little bunny?
Harmless? I thought you said he was a threat to this whole house and everyone in it. Isn't that what you said? Isn't that what you've been talking about this whole time?
He is a threat, but only at night. During the day, he's just a very sleepy rabbit, and that's why we have to do it now, while the sun is still up. Follow me, there isn't much time. Toby stayed down here forever, and the others will come home soon. Boy, you must have been tired, Harold. You slept through lunch. Bunnicula was sleeping peacefully, although Harold thought he looked a little green around the gills. Then he wondered how rabbits could have gills. Okay, Harold, do your stuff. I need to get the stuff I need from the kitchen.
What do you want me to do? I can't read your mind.
Get him out of the cage and to the floor.
What? How am I supposed to do that?
Use your head.
Looking at the cage, Harold decides what he will do.
Until that moment, Harold never had to face the possibility of an actual physical contact with a real, live rabbit. Harold squeezed his head through the tiny cage door and gently placed his teeth around the skin of the bunny's neck.
At that moment, Chester appeared at the door carrying in his mouth what looked like a nice, big, juicy, raw steak. Here his eyes plopped and he dropped Bunnicula. After all, he had missed lunch. Chester, what are you doing with that steak?
Don't you have the bunny out of his cage yet?
Who gets the steak?
Don't worry about the steak, Harold. Just put your head and that bunny out of the cage.
I'd have more motivation if I knew who was going to get that steak. Chester ignored Harold. They both pushed and pulled on, and suddenly Chester, the cage, Bunnicula, and Harold landing in a jumble on the floor. Bunnicula was still sound asleep. There you are. He's out. Now, let's eat.
No dice. Just read this to me so I'll be sure I'm doing it right. Take the book and start at the top of this page.
Why don't you read and I'll hold the steak? To destroy the vampire and end his region of terror, it is necessary to pound a sharp steak.
A sharp steak? What does that mean?
I'll taste it and tell you if it's sharp.
Oh, never mind. This will do. It's your loin. Keep reading.
To pound a sharp steak into the vampire's heart. This must be done during the daylight hours when the vampire has no powers.
Okay, this is it. If they had listened, this wouldn't be necessary. Chester dragged the steak across the floor and laid it across the sleeping bunny's chest. Then with his paws, he began to hit the steak.
Are you sure this is what they mean, Chester?
Am I anywhere near his heart?
It's hard to tell. All I can really see are his nose and his ears. You know, he's really sort of cute. Chester got a glint in his eyes again. He continued pounding away at the steak, harder and harder. Be careful, you hurt him.
Chester increased his attack. Harold was really getting worried when the door opened and Mr. and Mrs. Monroe entered the room. Chester, what are you doing? What are you doing with my dinner? And what's the matter with Bunnicula? Why is it on the floor?
Mr. Monroe took the beautiful steak away. Harold wished it a fond farewell with his eyes.
Suddenly, the kitchen door opened and Chester appeared carrying his water dish between his teeth. He ran toward Bunnicula and with a mad yowl, he threw the dish of water at the rabbit. Unfortunately, he was so hysterical that his aim was not the best, and the water bowl ended up all over Harold.
Mrs. Monroe picked up Chester up by the scruff of his neck and tossed him unceremoniously out the front door.
Robert, we're going to have to do something about that cat. Look at this mess. Dinner's ruined, the poor boy is out of his cage, and Harold is stopping wet. Poor Harold, wiping off Harold. You've had a rough day. You and Bunnicula. I don't know what's the matter with your friend, but unless he learns how to behave, he'll just have to spend the night outside.
And the steak is ruined. Why don't we let Harold have it? He deserves a treat anyway, don't you, old boy?
After Harold's delicious dinner, he turned his attention to the book still lying on the floor.
Reading book. Another method of destroying the vampire is to immerse the body in water. The body will shrivel and disappear as the vampire emits one last scream of terror. Phew! That is what Chester was trying to do. He was trying to kill Bunnicula. Thank goodness he missed. Chester's little face was pressed against the window. No sound could be heard, but from the movement of his lips, you could see that Chester was very unhappy. Poor Chester.
Go.
Hello, this is Chapter 7 of Bunnicula. I am Corin. I play Toby.
I am Ava, and I play Chester and Narrator 2.
I'm Jessica, and I play Narrator 1. I'm Kira Phillips, and I play Harold. In the days that followed, Chester's behavior was exemplary. He purred and cooed and cleaned his paws, and he rubbed against everyone's legs to show what a good boy he was. I was getting worried. Chester acts that way only when he has something devious in the back of his mind, but I didn't know what it was. He had tried everything in the book to get rid of the vampire, and all of his efforts had failed. But I knew from the expression on his face that something was definitely up. Of course, I didn't know for certain because he had not spoken to me since the steak incident. I guess he realized that my heart just wasn't in the destruction of a bunny vampire. The Monroes were relieved by Chester's improved behavior. They didn't know why Chester was behaving better, but they were pleased. The only disturbing factor was the reappearance of white vegetables each morning in the kitchen. And yet, after a few days, even that stopped, and life seemed to return to normal. One evening, I dropped by Bunnicula's cage to chat. I found myself doing that more and more since Chester had stopped talking to me. Of course, Bunnicula didn't talk back, but he was a good listener. That night, I was upset, as he seemed to be dragging his ears, as it were. He looked tired and listless. I felt his nose, and it seemed a little warmer than it should have had. I was alarmed. Harold ran over to Toby and began to bark, something that he rarely did. Harold ran back and forth between Bunnicula's cage and Toby. What's the matter, Harold?
Do you want to play with Bunnicula? Should I take him out of the cage?
Woof, woof. I'll ask Mom and
Dad, you wait here. I'm sorry, Harold, but Mom says you can't play with the rabbit. It causes too much commotion. Sorry, Harold. Maybe later when we're all here together.
I looked at Bunnicula. He gave a little shudder, and I felt like crying. My little bunny friend was sick, and I didn't know what to do. I wish I could tell Chester, but I knew it was no use. He was just too mad at me. I was on my own. That night, Harold couldn't sleep, and he was worrying about Bunnicula. He decided to go downstairs and check on his condition. What he saw when he entered the living room horrified him. Bunnicula was out of his cage on the floor while Chester stood in front of him, a piece of garlic around his neck, and his arms outstretched, blocking the kitchen door. Suddenly, it all fell into place. Chester was starving Bunnicula. Of course that's why he seemed so listless, and that's why no vegetables had turned white lately. Chester was not allowing Bunnicula to eat. Chester! Chester jumped a very high jump. What are you doing down here? I know what you're doing, Chester, and the jig is up.
That little bunny never hurt anybody. All he's doing is eating his own way. What do you care if he drains a few vegetables?
He's a vampire. Today, vegetables. Tomorrow, the world.
I think perhaps you're overstating your case.
Go back to bed, Harold. This is larger than the two of us. It may seem harsh, but I'm only being cruel to be kind.
Who's he being kind to? I wonder. The tomatoes and zucchinis of the world? Maybe a few cabbages. It didn't just make sense. But I could see I wasn't going to get anywhere with Chester tonight. Tomorrow, however, I was determined that my bunny friend Bunnicula would eat by sundown the next day.
This is chapter 8 of Bunnicula, and I play Harold and narrator 1. I play Chester and narrator 2.
I play Mr. Monroe and
Narrator
3.
I play Toby and Kira. Wait.
Mrs. Monroe.
Harold realized that there was nothing he could do for Bunnicula during the day, since he was sleeping, but that gave him time to plan a strategy. At first, he thought he would bring food to Bunnicula's cage, but then it occurred to him that Chester must be taking everything away that was given to him. There must be another way.
Harold thought and thought all afternoon and could see that Chester had done a good job of isolating Bunnicula from his food. As evening drew closer, he stumbled into the dining room and saw the answer to his problem sitting on the table. A big bowl of salad.
All Harold had to do was get Bunnicula to the salad and let him get his fill before the family in to eat. With the funny white dressing on it, they would never notice if a few vegetables were wet. I ran to the hallway to check the time. 6:15. It would be 15 minutes before the sun went down and Bunnicula woke up. I would need 5 minutes to get him from the cage to the table and feed him. I need at least 20 minutes. Okay, Chester was asleep in his brown chair, shedding in his sleep, still worn out from the previous night's activities. I looked upstairs. Toby was reading in his room, and Pete was listening to music in his room. I ran to the kitchen.
Hi, Harold. Sorry I can't play. I have to baste this chicken.
Harold noticed the oven
Timer.
still had 35 minutes to go.
Harold mumbles to himself. It'll be tight, but I can make it. Now where is Mr. Monroe? Harold went to the front door and whimpered loudly. Mrs. Monroe followed behind him.
I wait for Daddy.
Harold, he'll be home soon.
Soon isn't good enough. How soon?
Patience, boy. He's late at a school meeting. He should be here any time.
Mrs. Monroe went back into the kitchen while Harold, on the other hand, checked the time. 6:25.
It was getting dark. Chester was still
Sleep.
Time to swing into action. Harold, having watched Chester undo the lock on Bunnicula's cage and having participated in that unfortunate snake episode some days earlier, Harold knew he would have no problem getting Bunnicula out.
Harold just had to be a little more careful where he positioned his head so that he wouldn't find himself in the humiliating predicament of getting stuck a second time, but Harold's timing was perfect.
With Bunnicula swinging peacefully from Harold's cheek, he made his way stealthily toward the dining room as the last rays of sunlight gave away of the dark of night.
Once inside the dining room, Bunnicula woke up, very confused. It was not every day, after all, that a rabbit, or anyone in this case, wakes up in a dog's mouth.
Bunnicula opened his eyes wide and turned his face, as best as he could, after all, it wasn't a dog's mouth, and turned his face towards Harold.
Harold jumped up onto the nearest chair and placed Bunnicula safely on the table's edge.
Okay, there's your dinner. Go to it. Get your fill as fast as you can, poor bunny. I'll stand guard. Harold didn't know that Bunnicula fully understood what was going on, but the sight of vegetables piled high in the center of the table sent him darting into their direction. He was starving.
Unfortunately, Chester's timing was as good as Harold's, and no sooner had Bunnicula reached the edge of the salad bowl, but Chester entered the dining room, surveyed the scene, and across the table, and landed directly on the bunny. Oh, no, you don't! Bunnicula jumps into the salad bowl, and all the vegetables went flying as Chester flattened his ears, wiggled his rear, and smiled.
Run, Bunnicula, anywhere! Just get out of his way! Bunnicula jumped as Chester sprang.
Chester now found himself flat on his back in the bowl of greens, trying to stand up as he slipped in salad dressing.
Ruff, ruff!
The whole family rushed through the doors.
Oh, no.
That's it, Chester. This is Chester's last stand. Look at Bunnicula. How did he escape from his cage? Oh, he looks so scared. Of course he's scared. He probably forgot to close his cage, and he got out. And I think Chester has been chasing him. Oh, Mom, I think Bunnicula looks sick. We better take all the pets to the vet to see if there's been any damage done.
There's no need to take me to the vet, I whimpered.
Harold is probably due for his shots. We'll be sure to bring him too.
Mrs. Monroe grabs Chester out of the bowl.
I'm going to give Chester a quick bath. Why don't you put together a nice salad? Toby, you put all the animals back on the cake and I'll clean up the table.
Harold didn't stick around for an assignment. This time was not the time to be in the way. And besides, now the whole evening and night ruined worrying about the next morning visit to the vet. This little effort of mine, I thought, has been a disaster in more ways than one. This is chapter 9, and in chapter 9, I play narrator 1.
I play Chester.
I play narrator 2.
I play Harold.
Harold could remember thinking that this whole mess could have never been resolved happily. Bunnicula, his new friend, was suffering from starvation. And what about Chester, his old friend, who seemed to have flipped his lid and, if you'll pardon the expression, was in a doghouse with the Monroes?
Of far greater concern was Harold's own future. That night, all that consumed Harold's thoughts was the fear of the next day's injection. It all seemed hopeless. But looking back at the next day, I can tell you happy endings are possible, even in situations as fraught with complications as this one was.
Early the next morning, all the Monroes, Chester, Harold, and Bunnicula, piled in the car and trundled off to the vet. By the afternoon, the family was on their way to solving their problems.
The vet worked everything out very nicely. He discovered that Bunnicula was suffering from extreme hunger, and rather than jar his fragile stomach with solid food, the doctor decided he should be put on a liquid diet until he got better. So Bunnicula was immediately given some carrot juice, which he drank eagerly. After he finished, he looked over at Harold with a great grin on his face and winked.
Chester was diagnosed with being emotionally overwrought. It was suggested that he start sessions with a cat psychiatrist to work out what the doctor called a case of sibling rivalry with Bunnicula.
I asked Chester later what a sibling was, but he hasn't been speaking to me, so I looked it up. It's like a brother or a sister, and a sibling rivalry means when you are competing with your brother or sister for attention. I wasn't sure this was Chester's problem, but it sure explained a lot about Toby and Pete. As for me, I came out the best. The vet was all set to give me my shots when the nurse came in with my card and announced, "Wait, doctor, this dog doesn't need his shots yet. It's too soon." So I got a pat on the head and a doggy pop instead.
These days, everything is back to normal in the Monroe household. Almost. Bunnicula likes his liquid diet so much that the Monroes have kept in on it. And oddly enough, there have been no problems with the vegetables seriously turning white ever since. Chester, of course, insists that this proves his theory.
Obviously, Harold, the liquefied vegetables take the place of the vegetable juices, so Bunnicula has no need to go roaming anymore. Then he's not a vampire. Nonsense. He's a vampire, all right. But he's a modern vampire. He gets his juices from a blender. Case closed, Sherlock. Case closed. Oh, Chester. Yes, Harold? What are those two funny marks on your neck? Very funny. Very funny.
The Monroes never knew anything of Chester's theory. They changed grocery stores and to this day believe they were victims of a curious vegetable blight.
Bunnicula and I have become good friends. He still doesn't say anything, but he snuggles up next to me by the fireplace, and we take long cozy snooze together. One night, I sang him a lullaby, and he slept very peacefully. It was that night that has cemented our friendship.
Now about Chester, he's been seeing his psychiatrist, Dr. Cats, twice a week for some time now. He takes his therapy quite seriously. The other morning, Harold was trying to get a little sleep when Chester came over and nudged him in the ribs.
Harold, do you realize we've never really communicated? I mean, really communicated.
Harold opened one eye cautiously.
And in order to communicate, Harold, you have to really be in touch with yourself. Are you in touch with yourself, Harold? Can you look yourself in the mirror and say, I know who I am. I'm in touch with the meanness that is me, and I can reach out to the you-ness that is you.
Harold closed his eye. He was used to it by now. He no longer reads Edgar Allan Poe at night, and there's been no more talk a lot about vampires. So he's been finding himself screaming a lot.
The other night when I heard the most awful noise coming from the basement, I didn't even bat an eyelid. I knew it was Chester finding himself, as he calls it. He explained to me that he's getting in touch with his kittenhood, and I told him that's fine. But just to be sure, to let him know he's going to do it, so I can be somewhere else. Personally, I've been in enough trouble with Chester's friendship. I must now bring this narrative to a close. Since it's Friday night, Toby's night stays. Since it's Friday night, it's Toby's night to stay up late and read, and I can hear the crinkling of cellophane, and I can only hope he covers 2 chocolate cupcakes